Her husband didn't know the laptop camera was still on when she left for the hospital. He didn't know it was recording. He didn't know it was connected to a private cloud server. And he didn't know, he had never known, not once in 6 years of marriage, that the woman he had spent the last 14 months quietly discarding was the sole owner of the company whose address appeared on every piece of mail that came to their house. The trust that had been funding the life he believed he had built for himself, the building his career depended on, and the future he had already started planning with someone else. Maya Osei left the dining room table at 7:43 on a Tuesday evening in November, feverish and 8 months postpartum, her son bundled into her mother-in-law's arms. Iris, who had arrived uninvited, as she always did, wearing the particular expression she reserved for Maya, the one that looked like concern and functioned like contempt. Gordon was not there. Gordon was at dinner. Gordon was always at dinner on Tuesdays. The laptop stayed open on the table where Maya had been working. The cloud sync her late mother had configured ran silently in the background. The camera's green light blinked once, steadily at the empty room. And then Gordon's key turned in the lock. He was not alone. This isn't just a story about a husband who didn't know he was being recorded. It's about what happens when a man spends 6 years standing in a room he never actually owned. And the woman who held the deed decides, quietly and completely, that she is done pretending otherwise. If you believe that real strength doesn't announce itself, leave a like and subscribe. This channel is for you. Drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from tonight. Now, to understand what that camera saw, we need to go back to where this story actually began. To understand what happened that night, we need to go back to where this story actually began. It began the way most important things do, not with a dramatic gesture, but with a quiet one. It began with a woman sitting at a dining room table on a Tuesday evening in November, her hands moving efficiently across a keyboard, her infant son asleep upstairs, a fever building slowly behind her eyes that she had been ignoring for the better part of 6 hours because there was work to finish and dinner to clear and a husband who had not come home yet. Maya Adaize Osei Calloway was 31 years old. She was 8 months postpartum and running a temperature of 101.4, though she did not know the number yet. She knew the feeling, the particular woolen heaviness behind her temples, the way the kitchen light seemed slightly too bright, the way her joints ached in a manner that had nothing to do with the cold. She knew it the way a woman who has been quietly managing her own health alone learns to know things. She finished the distribution summary she had opened, minimized the OC Crest dashboard, and closed the browser tab with the offshore trust registry. She did not close the laptop. She meant to. She reached for it, and then Kofi stirred through the baby monitor. One small sound, then silence again, and her hand redirected automatically toward her phone to call a rideshare. The laptop stayed open on the table where it had always been. Its camera light blinked green at the empty room. The cloud sync her mother had configured ran silently in the background, exactly as it had been designed to do, exactly as Adaize Osei had intended when she built the server 3 years before she died and set the auto record function and never mentioned it to anyone except Constance. Maya texted Gordon, "Going to hospital. Fever. Can you come?" She stood at the front window for 4 minutes with her coat on and her bag over her shoulder, watching the street. Then she called the rideshare. The driver, a quiet man named David, asked her twice if she was all right. She said she was fine. She was not fine, but she had stopped knowing the difference. At Mercy General, the intake nurse, Angela Morris, noted the arrival time as 8:17 p.m. and asked for the name of Maya's emergency contact. Maya gave Gordon's number. Angela tried it twice at the desk while Maya filled out paperwork. It rang through to voicemail both times. Angela made a note in the file without comment, the small, careful neutrality of a woman who has seen this before, and brought Maya a warm blanket without being asked. Kofi was in the bassinet beside Maya's bed by 10 o'clock. Moved from Iris's arms, Iris, who had arrived at the hospital 40 minutes after Maya, fragrant and composed, touching Maya's arm and saying, in that soft musical register she used for everything, that she hoped Maya wasn't making too much of this, that the stress of new motherhood had a way of amplifying minor symptoms, that she'd read an article. Maya had looked at her mother-in-law and said, "Thank you for bringing him," and nothing else. Gordon arrived at 10:43. He did not apologize for the time. He stood at the foot of the bed with his coat still on and asked what the doctor had said. And when Maya told him, postpartum infection, IV antibiotics, 1 night minimum, he nodded in the way he had been nodding for the past year. The way that meant he was already in the next moment and simply finishing out this one. He stayed 40 minutes. He kissed her forehead when he left, a gesture so practiced it had stopped meaning anything, and said he'd check in tomorrow. His phone buzzed twice in his coat pocket on the way out the door. He didn't look back. The room settled into its hospital quiet. The monitor beeped softly. Kofi's chest rose and fell in the plastic bassinet. His small fists closed beside his ears the way they always were when he slept, as though he was holding on to something. Maya watched him for a long time. Her chest ached in a way that was not the fever. She should have slept. The antibiotics were already making her slow and warm and distant from the edges of her body. But somewhere around 2 in the morning, habit surfaced through the exhaustion the way it always did. The low-grade professional alertness Adaize had built into her across years of working side by side. The reflex that made Maya reach for her phone and open the cloud drive to check the quarter's numbers before she slept. The Osei Crest folder loaded. The distribution files were where she'd left them, and there, below them, was a folder she did not remember opening. It was labeled in the handwriting font her mother had used for everything important. For when you're ready, my love. Beneath the folder label was a subfolder that had not been there before. Its name was the date, today's date, and beside the file name, in the column that tracked recording duration, was a number. 4 hours and 22 minutes. Maya's thumb hovered over the play button. Kofi breathed beside her. The hospital hummed its low, indifferent hum. She did not press play, not yet. She lay with the phone in her hand and the green timestamp glowing in the dark and the fever heat moving through her in slow waves. And she thought about nothing in particular, which is sometimes how we think about the things we are not yet ready to name. But she was closer to ready than she knew. But before we get to what was on that recording, we need to go further back. We need to go to where it all began. Not in that hospital room, not in that marriage, but in a sunlit office on the 14th floor of a building on Michigan Avenue, where a woman named Dr. Adaize Osei once sat behind a desk covered in contract briefs and taught her daughter, without ever announcing that she was teaching, exactly how the world worked. Adaize Osei was the kind of woman who filled a room without raising her voice. She was a pharmaceutical IP attorney for 31 years, the founding partner of Osei Adeyemi Legal Group, and the most methodical thinker Maya had ever known. She did not waste words. She did not waste motion. She had a habit of reading contracts from the back page forward because she said that was where the real intentions lived, and she applied the same logic to people. She had been reading Gordon Calloway from the back page since the first dinner Maya brought him to, and what she found there she kept for a time to herself. Maya was 27 when Adaize received the diagnosis. Stage 3. The oncologist at Northwestern Memorial, a careful man named Dr. Reginald Park, used measured language. Adaize thanked him, asked 3 precise questions, and drove herself home. She called Maya that evening and said, in the same tone she used to discuss contract amendments, that there were some things they needed to organize. Maya did not understand the full weight of that word, organize, until she watched her mother spend the next 18 months building something extraordinary in plain sight. Adaize did not spend those months in grief. She spent them in preparation. She founded Osei Crest Pharmaceutical Licensing Group in the spring of that year, structured as a private limited liability company with a single beneficial owner. Maya Adaize Osei, her daughter's birth name, not her married name, a distinction Adaize made deliberately and never explained. She transferred her existing sublicensing agreements, 2 oncology compounds she had spent a decade negotiating into the portfolio, compounds distributed by Harlow Vance Biopharm across 14 states, into Osei Crest's holding structure. She established the private server. She configured the cloud sync. She assigned the corporate address to 14 Whitmore Lane, the house she had helped Maya and Gordon purchase the previous year, a detail she mentioned to Maya once, briefly, as a matter of administrative convenience. Maya had nodded and thought nothing more of it. The trust instrument was finalized on a Wednesday afternoon in late autumn, 11 days before Days died. Constance Adeyemi witnessed the signing. Maya was in the room but did not fully understand what she was signing. She understood the broad shape of it, the love inside it, but not yet the full architecture. That understanding was meant for later, for when she was ready. There was one thing Adasa asked Gordon to do during this period. She asked him gently and once to consider a prenuptial agreement. Not because she doubted him, she said, but because she had spent 30 years watching what happened to women who built without documentation. Gordon had laughed. He had called it insulting. He had looked at Maya in a way that suggested the request was her mother's interference rather than her mother's love. Maya had not pushed. She had wanted peace more than she had wanted protection, which was, she would later understand, the only mistake Adais ever asked her not to make. The irony which the audience can sit with for a moment is this. In the 26 months between Adai's death and that Tuesday evening in November, Osei Crest Pharmaceutical Licensing Group deposited $340,000 into the household account at First Meridian Bank that Gordon managed, monitored, and spent from freely. He paid his car note from it. He paid Iris's quarterly gift from it. He paid, though he did not know this yet and would not know it until a Tuesday morning in January in a conference room downtown, for 14 months of Thursday dinners from it. He never looked at the source code on the distribution line. It read, every quarter, the same two words, OC Trust. Gordon had seen it and assumed it was a legacy account from Adai's estate that would eventually run dry. It had not run dry. It would not. The instruction packet was the last thing Adais wrote. It was 9 pages, handwritten in the careful, unhurried script she used for everything that mattered, sealed in a cream envelope with Maya's full name on the front, Maya Adais Osei, not Calloway, and placed in the drawer of the desk in the home office at Whitmore Lane. On the first page, in her mother's voice as clearly as if she were in the room, were 11 words. Preparation is the most profound form of love. My darling, begin here. Maya received the packet the week after the funeral. She held it for a long time. Then she put it in the drawer and told herself she would open it when she was ready. The grief was too large. The loss was too recent. The marriage was still young, and Gordon was still warm, and she was not ready to need what her mother had left her. She closed the drawer. She went back to her life, and the packet waited, the way all prepared things wait, without urgency, without impatience, certain that the moment it was built for would eventually arrive. In the years that followed, the marriage that had seemed solid began, by degrees so small they were easy to dismiss, to change. The years that followed the Adai's death were not dramatically bad. That is the important thing to understand. There was no single morning when Maya woke up and recognized the life she was living. The erosion was gradual, the way all the worst erosions are. One small recession at a time, each one barely visible on its own, each one indistinguishable from ordinary life, until enough of them had accumulated to change the entire shape of the ground. In the first year, Gordon was still mostly himself. He was attentive in the practical ways. He remembered grocery lists. He came home at a reasonable hour. He asked about her grief with the sincerity of a man who genuinely wanted to help and simply did not know how. His limitations were not yet cruelties. They were just limitations. Maya had understood this, and she had loved him around them, the way you learn to love someone's edges once you have studied them long enough. Then his career began to move. Vantage Commercial Group promoted him to Senior Contracts Manager in the spring of their 3rd year of marriage, a title that came with a salary increase, a corner desk on the 14th floor, and, though Maya would not identify this until much later, a slow, almost imperceptible shift in how Gordon understood himself. He began to speak about his work with the authority of a man who believed he had built everything from scratch. He stopped asking Maya about hers. It was not a dramatic change. It was more like a door that closes so gradually you never hear the latch. Iris arrived more frequently. She had always been present. Sunday calls, holiday visits, the occasional drop-in that Maya had learned to navigate with practiced pleasantness. But something changed in the texture of her visits after Gordon's promotion. She began appearing on Tuesdays, then Thursdays, Then on afternoons when Gordon was at the office and Maya was alone with Kofi, who was not yet born but was already the subject of Iris's concerns. Even before the pregnancy, Iris had things she worried about. She worried softly and musically that Maya wasn't eating enough of the right things. She worried, touching Maya's arm, that the grief for Adais might be affecting Maya's ability to focus on the future. I read an article, she would say, which was how she prefaced the things she had decided before she arrived. The Christmas comment came in Kofi's third month. The family was gathered in Iris's living room on the north side. Gordon's cousin, his Aunt Patricia, Iris at the head of the table with her pearl earrings and her particular posture, and Maya had mentioned, in passing, that Adaisi had instilled in her a habit of keeping financial records separate. A small comment, conversational. Iris had reached over, touched Maya's forearm, and said with genuine-sounding warmth, "Your mother did have a way of making things complicated, didn't she? Gordon is so good at simplifying." A beat of silence. Gordon had said nothing. His cousin had changed the subject. Maya had smiled and reached for her water glass, her other hand pressing flat against her thigh beneath the table, where no one could see it. She tried harder after that. She cooked more carefully. She deferred in conversations she might once have entered. She told herself this was a form of love. The accommodation, the shrinking, and there were days when she almost believed it. Then the Thursdays began. It started 11 months ago, though Maya would later understand the timeline differently once the recording clarified it. Gordon had begun staying late on Thursdays, then having dinner after. A client, he said, a relationship that required maintenance. Maya had no reason to question it. She had every reason, in fact, to support it, because his work was their stability, or so she believed. She had nodded. She had kept his plate warm. The first inconsistency was a receipt she found in his coat pocket in January. Not looking, simply reaching for a pen she had lent him. Passerina, the receipt said, a restaurant on West Randolph she had never heard of. Dinner for two. She had asked about it, carefully, leaving room for the explanation she was already constructing on his behalf. He had said it was a client dinner, that he had mentioned it, that she had been distracted with the baby. She thought back. She could not remember him mentioning it. She accepted the explanation anyway, because the alternative required a different story than the one she was still trying to live inside. The name appeared on his phone 3 weeks later. A flash, nothing more. A notification she saw when she brought his phone to him, already locked again by the time he took it. SL. The letters arranged themselves into nothing she could prove. She filed them away. What the audience knows that Maya does not is this. Her name was Sasha Lim, 27 years old, junior contracts analyst at Vantage Commercial Group, 2 floors below Gordon's corner office. The Thursday dinners had been running for 14 months by the night Maya left for the hospital. The name SL appeared in Gordon's phone 43 times across that period. Maya never looked again after the first flash. This was not weakness. It was the particular exhaustion of a woman who has been carrying more than anyone knows, whose joints already ache, whose body is still recovering from the labor of bringing a life into the world, and who simply does not have the energy left to face a truth she is not yet resourced to act on. She sat on the couch on a Thursday evening in October, Kofi warm and heavy against her chest, and told herself the marriage was just going through something, that Gordon was stressed, that things would settle. She believed it the way you believe the things you need to be true in order to get through the night. She did not yet know that getting through the night was about to become insufficient, because what was coming next would not be words or coldness or receipts she could rationalize. What was coming next was the systematic removal of the small dignities that had been holding her in place. And it would happen quietly, the way Gordon did everything, in the language of practicality and reason, with Iris standing just behind him, nodding in soft, musical agreement. The language changed before anything else did. It was such a small thing that Maya almost missed it entirely. Gordon had always been decisive. It was something she had loved about him in the beginning, the way he moved through decisions without the circling hesitation that exhausted her in other people. But there is a difference between decisiveness and the particular flatness that entered his voice in the 6th month after Kofi was born. When he sat down across from Maya at the dining room table one Saturday morning with a printed spreadsheet and said, without preface, that they needed to talk about the household budget. He had revised it already before the conversation. The gym membership was gone, $42 a month, circled in the column where he had noted items for removal. The personal grocery account Maya used for Kofi's organic purees and her own supplements was folded into the general household line. The small discretionary fund she had kept since before the marriage, which she had never spent extravagantly, and which she thought of as the last quiet evidence of her own financial personhood, had been removed entirely. Gordon pushed the spreadsheet across the table and said the word belt tightening in the same tone he used for project timelines. He did not ask for her thoughts. He waited for her signature on the new bank authorization form he had also already prepared. Maya looked at the form. She looked at the numbers. Somewhere in her chest, something contracted slowly, like a room losing air. She signed. What she did not look at, what she had not looked at for months because the distributions came in quarterly, and she had not needed to examine them, and grief had made financial administration feel impossibly distant, was the joint account ledger in any real detail. She knew money came in. She knew the household ran. She trusted the mechanism her mother had built without studying it in the way Adiz had intended her to. The audience, however, can look. And what the ledger shows, the one sitting in the First Meridian Bank database under account number 8847-032CJ, the one Gordon reviewed every Monday morning with the attentiveness of a man managing his own resources, is this: of the $6,240 deposited into that account each month, $30,800 originated from the OC Trust distribution line, OC Crest Pharmaceutical Licensing Group. Maya's inheritance. Gordon's belt tightening was funded, to the tune of 61%, by the woman whose spending he had just restricted. The irony does not announce itself. It simply sits in the ledger, patient and exact, waiting. Below the household line, in the column Gordon had labeled professional development, was a recurring charge of $1,150 per month to Meridian Property Holdings, the management company for a one-bedroom apartment on North Dearborn Street. The lease had been signed 7 months prior. The name on it was not Gordon's. He had simply routed the cost through the joint account as a business expense, confident that Maya, in her postpartum fog, in her grief, in her gradually narrowing world, would not look closely enough to ask. She didn't. Then Iris began arriving on Tuesdays. She came with casseroles initially, which was how she always arrived, bearing something that made refusal feel ungracious. She would settle herself in the kitchen with a warmth that felt, on the surface, like help, and within 20 minutes she would be rearranging something: the cabinet order, the feeding schedule, a comment to Gordon delivered in Maya's presence about how Maya seemed tired, how the baby seemed unsettled, how she worried that Maya might be struggling more than she was letting on. "You know how she gets inside her own head," she said once, touching Gordon's arm while Maya was standing 4 feet away holding Kofi. Gordon had said nothing. He had nodded in the careful way of a man who has already decided to agree. The word fragile entered their vocabulary the way all insidious words do, through repetition in soft tones, through the grammar of concern, through Iris's phone calls to Gordon's cousin Patricia and her friend Denise at church, where she mentioned, always gently, that Maya was still struggling, that the grief had really affected her stability, that Gordon was being so patient. Maya did not hear these calls. She didn't need to. She could feel the shape of the story being built around her in the way you feel a draft before you find the open window. The moment it became structural arrived on a Thursday evening in late September. Maya had mentioned over dinner that she wanted to take Kofi to her aunt's home in Atlanta for a long weekend. A trip she had been planning quietly for weeks, the kind of gentle, ordinary life event that should have required nothing more than a calendar check. Gordon set down his fork. He said he wasn't sure that was a good idea. He said Maya hadn't been herself lately. He said the travel might be too much given how she had been managing. He said, and this was the sentence that landed differently than the others, that he wasn't certain she was in the right state to be making that kind of decision alone. Maya did not argue. The breath went out of her slowly, and she looked at Kofi in his chair and said she would think about it. And Gordon picked up his fork again as though the matter were simply resolved. 3 weeks later, her obstetrician, Dr. Priya Mathur, noted elevated cortisol markers and mild hypertensive readings at Maya's 6-month postpartum check. She asked gently whether there was anything going on at home. Maya said things were fine. She said it with her hands still in her lap, her back straight, her voice entirely level. Dr. Mather noted the response in Maya's file without comment and recommended a follow-up in 4 weeks. Maya drove home through November rain and told herself again that this was temporary. That stress was stress. That marriages went through seasons. She had almost convinced herself. She was very nearly there, until she found the email notification on the shared computer 2 days later. A booking confirmation for a weekend at a hotel in Michigan she had never heard of, dated for the same week she had asked about the Atlanta trip. Gordon had said the travel wasn't realistic this year. He had been right, in a sense, just not about which travel he meant. The Vantage Commercial Group annual client dinner was held on the second Friday of October at the Meridian Grand Hotel on Michigan Avenue, in a ballroom on the 14th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the lake that Maya would have loved under different circumstances. Gordon had told her 3 days before that it was a casual affair. Business casual, he had said. She wouldn't need to fuss. She had believed him. She had worn a deep green wrap dress, one of the few things that still fit her comfortably across her full hips and rounded stomach. Soft fabric that she had pressed carefully that morning while Kofi slept. And she had felt in the mirror before they left, almost like herself again. She had felt for one careful moment that the evening might be something they could share. The ballroom disabused her of this within 90 seconds of arrival. It was not casual. The women around her wore floor-length gowns and structured cocktail dresses, their hair set and their jewelry deliberate. Maya stood in the entrance in her green wrap dress with her postpartum body and her flat shoes and understood, with a clarity that went all the way to the floor, that Gordon had known exactly what the dress code was. He had moved ahead of her already, greeting 2 senior partners with the ease of a man entirely at home, and he did not look back. She took a glass of water from a passing tray. She found a position near the windows. She told herself she was fine. Iris arrived 40 minutes in a coordinated lilac ensemble, and found Maya with the efficiency of someone who had been looking. She touched Maya's arm in greeting and let her gaze travel just once down the length of Maya's dress. She said nothing about it. She said instead, brightly, that it was wonderful Maya had been able to come out, and that she imagined it wasn't easy with the baby at home, and that Maya looked like she was managing remarkably well, all considered. Each sentence landed like a hand pressing gently on a bruise. Maya said thank you and meant nothing by it. Gordon found her briefly around 9 o'clock to introduce her to a client named Marcus Webb, a developer from the North Shore, who shook Maya's hand and asked what she did. Before she could answer, Gordon said, "She's at home with our son right now. She's taking a little break from the professional world." He said it warmly. He said it the way you describe someone convalescing. Marcus Webb nodded with polite sympathy and turned the conversation back to Gordon, and Gordon accepted this without hesitation, and Maya watched him receive it and said nothing, her free hand pressing flat against her thigh. 20 minutes later, Marcus Webb mentioned a sublicensing structure his firm had been navigating in a pharmaceutical partnership, and Gordon, without a beat, without a thought, said he didn't know much about that space, that it was specialized work, really a niche area. Maya, who had spent 2 years drafting sublicensing amendments at Osai Adeyemi Legal Group, who understood the architecture of compound licensing better than anyone in the room, held her water glass in both hands and said nothing. While he dismissed the work her mother had built, Ocicrest quarterly distribution had cleared 3 days prior. The irony is not small. Then something shifted on the far side of the room. It was a change in Gordon's posture, almost imperceptible. A slight lift in the shoulders, a fractional repositioning of his feet. And Maya caught it before she understood it. She followed his gaze across the ballroom to the entrance where a group of junior staff had arrived together, and in the middle of them was a woman who moved through the room the way people move when they have never had reason to doubt the quality of their welcome. She was assembled and deliberate, her posture carrying the forward ease of someone who knows exactly where she is going. She wore a deep burgundy dress, and she laughed at something someone said, and the laugh was light and unguarded. Gordon excused himself from the conversation. Maya watched him cross the room. She watched the gap between them close. She watched him touch the woman's shoulder in greeting. Collegial, professional, the kind of touch that could mean nothing. And then, as the group around them dispersed in different directions, and Gordon and the woman stood briefly apart from the crowd, she watched his hand drop to the small of her back. It rested there for 4 seconds. It rested there with the ease of a hand that had rested there before. Iris appeared at Maya's shoulder. "That's one of his analysts," she said helpfully, musically. "Lovely girl. Very sharp." She touched Maya's arm. "So good that Gordon has such a strong team." Maya did not respond. Her chest had gone very quiet in a way that was not peace. Something she had been carrying for 14 months. The weight of every rationalization, every receipt explained away, every locked phone and Thursday evening in SL that she had filed carefully in the part of herself where she kept things she was not yet ready to know, shifted permanently in its position. It did not break. It settled. It became fact rather than a suspicion, the way water becomes ice. Not a dramatic event, just a threshold crossed. She set her glass on a nearby table. She found her coat. She said goodbye to no one. In the ride share, the city moved past the window in long smears of amber and white. Maya sat with her bag in her lap and her hands folded on top of it and her face entirely still. The driver asked if she wanted music. She said no, thank you. She watched Chicago come and go in the glass, and she did not cry, and she did not speak, and she allowed herself, for the first time in over a year, to simply know what she knew. The question was no longer what was happening. The question was what she was going to do about it, and she did not yet have the answer. But 6 weeks later, in a hospital room at 2 a.m, with her son breathing beside her, and a recording that ran 4 hours and 22 minutes, she would find it. She pressed play at 2:07 a.m. Kofi was asleep in the bassinet 6 inches from her right elbow, his small chest rising and falling with the unhurried certainty of someone who has never had reason to distrust the world. Maya had propped her phone against the water cup on the hospital tray. The antibiotics had taken the fever's edge off, leaving a residual warmth behind her eyes that made the screen slightly too bright. She did not adjust the brightness. She watched. The recording opened on an empty room. The dining room at 14 Whitmore Lane, her dining room, her table, the lamp in the corner she had chosen. The camera angle was slightly elevated, the laptop's natural position on the table, and the frame captured the full width of the room. The kitchen entrance on the left, the front hallway visible through the doorway on the right. For 41 minutes, the room was simply a room. The lamp cast its familiar amber light. Nothing moved. Then the hallway light came on. Maya watched Gordon enter the frame. She watched him scan the room with the easy confidence of a man who believes the house is empty and belongs to him entirely, which was, she understood now, always how he had moved through it. She watched the woman behind him, assembled and certain, moving through the doorway of Maya's home as though she had moved through it before, or had spent enough time imagining it that the reality felt like memory. The cashmere wrap was the deep burgundy that Maya had chosen herself in a shop on Oak Street for an occasion that had not yet arrived. It hung from Sasha Lim's shoulders with the ease of something worn rather than borrowed. Something happened in Maya's chest then. Not a crack, not a break. Something more like a long-held breath releasing. The particular exhaustion of a body that has been braced for impact for so long that the actual collision almost feels like relief. She did not look away. She did not turn the volume down. She watched Gordon open the wine. The 2019 Barolo she had been saving in the cabinet above the refrigerator, behind the everyday bottles, for a 6th anniversary that was 4 weeks away. She watched him pour it without looking at the label, without a moment's pause, with the carelessness of a man who does not know what he is opening because he does not know what the house contains. She watched Sasha settle into Maya's chair and receive the glass. Then Gordon began to talk. The audience has already heard what came next at the opening of this story, but Maya was hearing it for the first time, and the experience of hearing it for the first time is worth understanding. She heard him call her soft, sad, honestly a little pathetic. She heard the word grief spoken the way you speak of an excuse that has expired. She heard him describe the house as straightforward to handle, the divorce as messier but manageable, the baby as a complication and a logistical problem he had already begun solving. She heard him say he loved Sasha, the first time, then the second, then the third. She heard the particular ease of a man who has never once, in this house, worried about being heard. Maya did not cry. Her hands stayed still on the blanket. Her breathing slowed rather than quickened, in the way of someone moving into cold water rather than away from it. The deliberate accommodation of an irreversible fact. She watched all 4 hours and 22 minutes. The scene softened into something quieter after the recording ended. The hospital sounds reasserted themselves. The distant beep of monitors, a cart in the hallway, Kofi's even breathing. Maya sat with the blank screen for a moment, her phone gone dark in her hand. Then she opened the file manager. The folder was labeled in her mother's handwriting font, the same font Adayes had used for every document she had ever considered important. For when you're ready, my love. Maya had not been ready for 2 years. She opened it now. The instruction packet was 9 pages. The first page had only 2 things on it, a phone number and 11 words in Adayes' careful script. Preparation is the most profound form of love. My darling, begin here. Maya read the line twice. The second time, it landed differently than the first. Not as a phrase, but as a verdict. Her mother had known. Not specifically, not prophetically, but with the deep structural certainty of a woman who had spent 30 years reading contracts from the back page forward and applying the same logic to people. Adayes had known that love without preparation is a beautiful thing that can be taken from you. So she had prepared. 18 months of deliberate, unhurried, meticulous preparation. And she had handed all of it to Maya in a cream envelope and trusted her to find the right moment. Maya had found it. She dialed the number at the top of the page. It rang once, then a second time. Constance Adeyemi answered on the second ring, at 2:41 in the morning, in a voice that was fully awake. Not surprised, not groggy, fully awake, as though she had been waiting in a lit room. Maya said, "I watched it. I'm ready." A brief pause. Then Constance said, "I've been ready for 2 years. Download the recording before you do anything else. I'll handle everything from here." That was all. The call lasted 47 seconds. Maya saved the recording file to the secure server, labeled it with the date and the timestamp, and set her phone face down on the hospital tray. She looked at Kofi. He slept on, untroubled, his fists loose beside his ears. The narrator can tell you that something shifted in Maya in that hospital room that no subsequent event would ever shift back. The woman who had walked out of the Meridian Grand Hotel 6 weeks ago, still, composed, absorbing, was not the same woman who set her phone down on that tray. The stillness was the same, but the thing underneath it had changed completely. 47 days would pass. A conference room door would open, and Constance Adeyemi, who had been ready for 2 years, would walk through it first. 47 days passed. Then a conference room door opened. The mediation suite occupied the 9th floor of a building on West Madison Street, in a set of rooms that smelled of printer toner and recycled air, and the particular neutrality of spaces designed to contain conflict without absorbing it. The mediator, a methodical man named Gerald Okafor, had arranged the room with the practiced efficiency of someone who had seen every variety of marital dissolution and had stopped expecting surprises. Long table, water pitchers at intervals, 2 sides. Gordon arrived first at 8:52 with his attorney, a compact man named David Rice who carried a leather portfolio and moved with the brisk confidence of someone billing by the hour. Gordon was well-dressed. Charcoal suit, no tie, the studied casualness of a man who wants to appear unbothered. He set a property assessor's report on his side of the table and a salary comparison document beside it, and arranged them with the small satisfaction of someone laying down cards they believe will win. He did not look toward the door. Maya arrived at 8:58, 2 minutes before the scheduled start. She wore a dark navy blouse and her hair pulled back simply. She was composed in the way she had been composed since the hospital. Not the composed of suppression, but the composed of clarity, stillness that had changed its nature. She carried nothing. Constance Adeyemi walked beside her, one step behind and to the left, carrying a laptop bag, a projector case, a black binder, and a USB drive labeled in the adhesive font of an organized professional. Evidence package. Osei v. Callaway. Gordon looked up when they entered. His eyes moved to Constance, compact, unhurried, entirely at ease, and made the calculation that people make when they encounter an unfamiliar presence in a room they believe they control. He addressed her once briefly, before taking his seat, asking whether she needed help setting up. Constance did not answer. She set the projector on the table, located the HDMI port on the room's display screen, and connected it with the efficiency of someone who had done this before and would not be doing it again. Gordon's attorney, David Rice, asked what was being presented. Evidence, Constance said. That was all. The room settled. Gerald Okafor confirmed the parties present for the record. Gordon folded his hands on the table. Maya sat at the far end, both hands in her lap, and looked at the blank projection screen. Constance opened the recording at the 17-minute mark she had selected and pressed play. The room went silent. On the screen, in the ambient light of the dining room at 14 Whitmore Lane, Gordon Callaway sat at the dining table in the chair across from Maya's empty one. The date stamp in the corner read the night of November 4th. Sasha Lim sat in Maya's chair, her posture easy, the deep burgundy cashmere wrap visible across her shoulders. The same wrap Gordon had told Maya he returned, the same one Maya had chosen in a shop on Oak Street for a 6th anniversary that never arrived. On the table between them, a bottle of wine, the 2019 Barolo. Gordon's attorney leaned forward. He looked at the screen. He looked at Gordon. Gordon did not move. On the screen, Gordon's voice filled the room with the relaxed authority of a man who believes he is entirely alone and entirely right. The audience heard him say it then. The room heard it now. Soft, sad, honestly a little pathetic. The grief thing stopped being real about a year ago. The house is straightforward to handle. She doesn't have the fight in her. I love you. At the third declaration, David Rice set his pen down on his legal pad without a word. Constance paused the recording. Gordon's image froze on the screen. Mid-laugh in Maya's kitchen, in a house he did not own, wearing the ease of a man living inside someone else's preparation and calling it his own. He was looking at Sasha in the frozen frame. He was not looking at anything in the room now. He was looking at the table. Constance opened the binder. She did not narrate. She did not editorialize. She placed each document on the table with the same deliberate, unhurried motion. The way a person sets a well-prepared meal in front of someone who has been waiting. Without ceremony, without theater, because the thing itself is sufficient. The first document, the Osei Crest Pharmaceutical Licensing Group Beneficial Ownership Certificate. She said in her precise, unornamented way that the company was wholly owned by Maya Adeze Osei, not Maya Callaway, and that the corporate address of record was 14 Whitmore Lane, the marital home, which predated the marriage by the date of the trust instrument, which was the second document now on the table. Gordon's claim to the property was not a marital asset claim. It was a claim against a corporate address that had never been his. David Rice put his hand on Gordon's arm. Gordon did not acknowledge it. The third document, the distribution ledger from First Meridian Bank, account 88470032CJ. Constance noted, without inflection, that of the household account deposits over the previous 26 months, $340,000 had originated from the OC Trust line, Osei Crest quarterly distributions, not from Gordon's Vantage Commercial Group salary, as Gordon had represented in his initial financial disclosure to these proceedings. Something crossed Gordon's face then, not anger. The audience who has been watching him for 45 minutes will recognize it. The particular expression of a man who has been standing in a room, certain of its dimensions, and has just understood that the walls are in entirely different places than he believed. It was not a dramatic expression. It was very quiet. It was recognition. The fourth document, the property title for 14 Whitmore Lane, registered under the Osei Crest corporate structure. The fifth, the sublicence summary, 2 oncology compounds, Harlow Vance Biopharm Distribution, $2.1 million annually in current royalties. David Reese said, "I'd like to request a recess." Gerald Okafor acknowledged the request. Reese leaned toward Gordon and spoke at low volume. Gordon nodded once, mechanically, the nod of someone performing comprehension rather than feeling it. Then he looked down the length of the table at Maya. "Can I just—" he began. "Mr. Calloway." Constance's voice was not raised. It did not need to be. "Direct communications go through counsel." Gordon stopped. He looked at Maya with the expression of a man who has something he needs to say and has just understood there is no version of this room in which he gets to say it. Maya looked back at him. She had not looked at him directly since they sat down. She looked now and she held it, and in a voice that did not shake and did not perform and did not ask for anything, she said, "My mother didn't leave me money. She left me a room you never found." The room held that sentence for a moment. Then Gerald Okafor noted the time and called a 15-minute recess. And when the session resumed, David Rice had reorganized his papers and his opening position considerably. Gordon's property claim was addressed first. It did not survive the morning. His financial disclosure was referred for forensic review. Each claim he had entered the room carrying was examined against the documents Constance had placed on the table, and each one was found to be resting on a foundation that did not belong to him. At 12:34 p.m., Gerald Okafor noted the session outcome for the record. Constance closed the binder. The projector screen went dark. Maya gathered nothing because she had brought nothing that needed gathering. She stood and she and Constance walked out of the room together, and the door closed behind them with the ordinary sound of a door that has finished its purpose. The weeks that followed were quiet. That is the first thing worth saying. There was no celebration. There was no announcement. There was only the orderly, unhurried unraveling of a life that had been built on foundations that did not belong to the man who built it. Gordon's situation at Vantage Commercial Group resolved itself within 3 weeks of the mediation. The recording had been submitted as evidence in the proceedings, which meant it existed in documentation that colleagues, HR administrators, and a senior partner named Thomas Elridge would eventually see referenced. The details of what Gordon had said about the house, about the divorce, about the baby being a complication, circulated in the particular way that things circulate in professional environments where trust is currency and discretion is its own kind of asset. He was not terminated immediately. He was repositioned. His corner office on the 14th floor became a shared workspace on the 11th. The title remained for a time because titles are the last things to go. But the room had changed. He knew it. The people around him knew it. He had spent years building the appearance of a man who had everything under control, and the recording had shown, in 4K and with a timestamp, exactly what that control had cost. Sasha Lim learned about the apartment on a Thursday. The irony of the day was not lost, though no one noted it aloud. The management company for her building on North Dearborn Street sent a standard lease renewal notice addressed to her unit, and in the footer of the notice, in the small print that most people don't read, was the name of the parent company, Whitmore Lane Holdings, LLC, a subsidiary of Osei Crest Pharmaceutical Licensing Group. She looked it up. She found the beneficial ownership records, which were public. She found Maya's name. She put her phone down on her kitchen counter. The kitchen Gordon had helped her furnish in the apartment Gordon had been funding from Maya's inheritance. And she did not call him that evening. She did not call him the next morning. She did not call him at all. She simply stopped, the way water stops when it reaches the edge, with no drama and no announcement, because there was nothing left worth continuing. Gordon called her 11 times in the following 72 hours. The calls went to voicemail. He did not leave messages after the fourth attempt. Iris filled her prescription at the Walgreens on Clark Street that she had used for 11 years, as she did every month. The pharmacist, a patient man named Robert Choi, processed the claim as usual. The arthritis compound, her monthly prescription, the one that kept the inflammation in her hands manageable, ran through the Harlow Vance Biopharm distribution chain, which sublicensed through Osei Crest Pharmaceutical Licensing Group. The transaction cleared. Iris picked up her medication. She drove home. She made tea. She sat in the coordinated quiet of her living room, and she did not know what the narrator knows, and she did not know what the audience knows. She simply went about her evening, as she always did, sustained by a chain that ran back to a woman she had called useless, whose mother she had dismissed as a complication. The narrator notes this without commentary. Maya never mentioned it. She didn't need to. The architecture was sufficient. Gordon appeared at 14 Whitmore Lane on a Saturday afternoon in late January, his collar turned up against the cold, his hands in his coat pockets. He rang the bell once, and then stood back from the door the way people stand when they are not sure of their welcome. Maya heard the bell from the kitchen, where Kofi was in his chair watching her move around the room with the alert, uncritical attention of someone who has never yet been disappointed. She set down what she was holding. She went to the door. She opened it 6 inches, not fully. 6 inches was enough. Gordon looked at her. He said her name. He said he thought they should talk. He said there were things he wanted to explain, things he wanted her to understand about how it had happened, and his voice had the particular quality of a man who has been rehearsing sentences and still cannot find the right ones. Maya stood in the 6-inch opening and looked at him without anger and without softness and without any of the expressions he might have known how to respond to. She said simply and finally that she didn't think that would be helpful for either of them. She wished him well. She closed the door. She stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to his footsteps recede down the front path. Then she went back to the kitchen. Kofi was watching the window. She picked him up and held him against her shoulder and stood there until she heard Gordon's car start and pull away from the curb, and then for a little while longer, just because she wanted to. That evening, a Tuesday, because it was always a Tuesday, Maya sat at the dining room table where she had always sat. Kofi was asleep upstairs. The laptop was open on the table in front of her, where it had always been. The camera's green light blinked softly in the room's amber lamplight. She opened the instruction packet for the last time. She had read every page now except the final one, which she had been saving without quite knowing she was saving it. She turned to it. Her mother's handwriting filled the page in the careful, unhurried script that Adiz had used for everything that mattered. If you're reading this, you're already free. Now live like it. Maya sat with those words for a long time. The house was quiet around her. Outside, the first real snow of the season had begun to fall. Light flakes, unhurried, settling against the window glass without sound. This is what the camera saw in the end. Not the betrayal, not the cruelty, not the careful, patient dismantling of a woman's worth by people who had never understood what she was worth. The camera saw a woman who had been prepared for exactly this moment by a mother who loved her enough to build something that would outlast her own life. It saw that real power does not always announce itself. It waits. It holds its ground. It hands you a 9-page instruction packet and trusts you to find the right moment. Maya Adizi Osei had found it. If this story moves something in you, if you have known what it is to be quiet in a room that underestimated you, or to inherit something from someone who saw further ahead than you did, leave a comment below and tell us. And tell us where in the world you're watching from tonight. This channel is for everyone who understands that the most powerful thing in any room is often the thing no one thought to look for. Maya closed the laptop. The green light went dark. Outside, the snow kept falling. Steady, unhurried, covering everything in clean white silence. She did not move to draw the curtains. She had nowhere she needed to be.